What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. It is New Year's Eve 2025, and I have some breaking news to share with you guys. Right now it is 14:44 Eastern Time here in the United States, and we have some major breaking news coming in from Eastern Europe and from Latin America. So, a Russian nuclear missile has officially entered combat duty in Belarus. And if you're not aware, Belarus is a country in Eastern Europe right next to NATO. It sits between Russia and Poland. Russia's nuclear-capable Oreshnik missile system has entered active service in Belarus, Russia's defense ministry said Tuesday, as the U.S. efforts to broker a deal to end the nearly 4-year war in Ukraine have entered a pivotal stage. The ministry released a video showing combat vehicles that are part of the mobile intermediate-range ballistic missile system driving across a forest as part of combat training. The ministry's announcement followed a statement from Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, who said earlier this month that the Oreshnik had arrived in the country. Lukashenko said that up to 10 such missile systems will be stationed in Belarus, and this is coming from Reuters. So this has been confirmed by a major media outlet. Reuters is confirming that Russia has deployed a nuclear missile in Belarus right next to NATO. And if you're not aware, the Oreshnik system is basically a two-stage ICBM. So most ICBMs have 3 rocket boosters or 3 stages. As the missile goes up into space, each rocket booster falls off until the ICBM reaches its apogee, or the highest point in its trajectory, and then the warheads are released from the warhead bus. And then each warhead has mini jets inside of it to help steer the warheads to their targets, okay? So this is a 2-stage system. Russia essentially took one of their normal ICBMs and just removed one of the rocket boosters, which makes it intermediate range missile up to, let's say, 4,000 miles or so, which allows Russia to strike anywhere from North Africa up to Greenland, okay? So this is potentially one of the biggest news stories of our lifetime. Russia deploying a nuclear missile in Belarus, literally just maybe 200 miles from the border of Poland, and maybe just a couple hundred miles away from Berlin, Brussels, London, Paris, okay, Rome. This is huge news, guys. We're going back in time to the early 1980s, okay? Putin said that he idolizes the Soviet Union and he misses the good old Soviet Union days. Well, he's bringing those days back by doing exactly what the Soviets did, okay? Deploying nuclear missiles right on the border of NATO. And I reported a couple of days ago that the U.S. was now going to be responding by deploying their Dark Eagle missile system to Germany in 2026. Okay, so we are now back into the 1980s. You need to make sure you have a nuclear war survival plan. I know it sounds crazy, but it's really not that difficult to prepare for nuclear war. The number one most important thing is having a proper fallout shelter, which is something that our government has stopped telling its citizens to do, is to have a proper fallout shelter. Okay, in most residential homes around the United States, your basement is going to be the best fallout shelter. If you live in an apartment complex or in a big city, you have tons of options for fallout shelters that are actually better than out here in the countryside. Okay, you have multi-story buildings that you can go into the basement of them or in the middle floors, which will provide much better protection than a house in the countryside with a basement. You can go into metro stations, all kinds of different options in cities, okay? And the Israeli Prime Minister said that Iran could soon be capable of targeting U.S. cities with nuclear weapons. He said this while visiting Mar-a-Lago and meeting with Trump. He also said that Iran is returning to the production of ballistic missiles. Okay, so we know that Netanyahu came to Mar-a-Lago for the purpose of convincing Trump to strike Iran again. Netanyahu wants to strike Iran's ballistic missile program, okay, more so than their nuclear program, because yes, the Iranians can always develop nuclear material, and they always will, no matter how many sites we bomb. They're always going to reconstitute, and they always have underground facilities that they can continue to produce nuclear material. But if we take out those missile sites, then it doesn't matter how much nuclear material they have. If they don't have any missiles, then they won't be able to really do anything with that, okay? Now, if Israel and the U.S. decide to strike Iran in 2026, if they do really want to harm the missile program in Iran, it's going to take a big strike, multiple strikes, probably over several days, hundreds of strikes potentially, because most of Iran's missiles are located deep underground, underneath mountains that are over 8,000 feet. All of Iran is mountainous, okay? It's like Colorado. That's the best way to describe it. It's like a dry version of Colorado. It's pretty much like New Mexico or Arizona in terms of topography and climate, okay? Lots of tall mountains mixed with deserts, and underneath those mountains is where the Iranians have built these massive bunkers that are essentially impervious to anything short of earth-penetrating nuclear weapons, which we're not going to use, okay? And the Iranian president said yesterday that the response of the Islamic Republic of Iran to any oppressive aggression will be harsh and regrettable. Wow, so Iran already knows that Israel and the U.S. are thinking about more strikes, and he's saying that the response will be harsh and regrettable, okay? Also, the Iranian IRGC has declared the Royal Canadian Navy a terrorist group in retaliation against Canada's decision to list the IRGC as a terrorist group. So very interesting. And Ynet News in Israel is reporting that an Iranian cyber attack caused disruption to communications and payment systems in Israel. So guys, we have to keep Israel in our prayers. Keep the people of Israel, the Jewish people, in your prayers. God's chosen land, chosen people. Okay, keep it in your prayers. Also, 2 Russian military cargo planes landed in Tehran over the weekend. So this is very concerning. And the U.S. Coast Guard is continuing to pursue the oil tanker that was off the coast of Venezuela last week, the 3rd oil tanker that everybody said the U.S. was about to seize. Well, they haven't seized it yet. It is now apparently sailing through the North Atlantic, possibly towards Iceland or Greenland, and the crew of the oil tanker recently painted a Russian flag on the hull of the ship, appearing to claim protection status from the Russian Federation, according to the U.S. officials who spoke to the New York Times. Okay, so that's why we haven't taken this oil tanker, because it's Russian. All right, and the last thing Trump wants to do is piss Putin off, who could release the Bubba photos, okay? And an Iranian armed drone, the Mohajer 6, is now visually confirmed in Venezuela for the first time at the El Libertador Air Base. Okay, so Iranian armed drones have been visually confirmed to be in Venezuela. And 2 sanctioned oil tankers arrived at Venezuelan ports over the past few days, despite the U.S. naval blockade of oil tankers. So we did not seized those tankers that arrived in the Venezuelan ports. I suspect that we're going to seize them after they fill up on oil in Venezuela, because that's what they do. They come in empty, they fill up, and then they leave. So that's probably why they weren't seized yet. And the CIA earlier this month, with support from U.S. Special Operations Forces, carried out a drone strike targeting a remote dock and port facility on the coast of Venezuela, with intelligence suggested was being used by the Venezuelan international criminal organization Tren de Aragua to store drugs and move them onto boats for onward shipping. In the first such strike on Venezuela by the U.S., sources familiar with the matter told CNN. So the first land strike on Venezuela has already occurred. It happened before Christmas, probably the reason why we heard all those nuclear codes a few days before Christmas. So they did attack some kind of facility that was being used to load drugs, cocaine, onto boats, and the Colombian president Gustavo Petro actually confirmed it yesterday. He said that the CIA land strike targeted a cocaine laboratory in Maracaibo, Venezuela. We're also hearing that some CIA officials were reportedly upset that Trump publicized an operation in Venezuela that is normally kept secret, okay? And eyewitnesses in the area of Maracaibo are now reporting that they did see mysterious explosions. Okay, so those were the missiles from the drones, probably Hellfire missiles. 2 members of Venezuela's Wayuu indigenous community in the area of the cocaine laboratory told NBC News that they witnessed an unexplained explosion on December 18th that destroyed a hut that possibly was used for storage. The arid coastal strip in the northwest of Venezuela, known as Alta Guajira, is heavily controlled by the National Liberation Army, or ELN in Spanish, an armed guerrilla group known for its history of drug trafficking that is also active in neighboring Colombia. Wow. And Lithuania is now equipping border bridges with Russia and Belarus with structures for attaching explosives so that in the event of a conflict, they can be quickly exploded to delay an enemy advance. So they're pre-mining all bridges and roads along the border with Russia and Belarus. This is huge, guys. Also, Latvia just completed the construction of a border fence along its entire border with Russia. So things are escalating in the Baltics. I do believe that Putin is going to attack the Baltics in the next 1 to 2 years. And Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov announced that Russia will now hold peace negotiations solely with the United States, warning that Moscow's position will grow tougher after the alleged attack on Putin's compound. Okay, so Russia saying that their position will grow tougher. And the U.S. permanent representative to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, expressed doubt about the fact of a Ukrainian drone attack on Putin's residence. He basically just said, why would Ukraine suddenly attack Putin's compound in the middle of negotiations, especially since the negotiations are at an advanced stage. And a source close to the French president, Emmanuel Macron, told Reuters that there is no evidence backing Russia's claim that Ukraine targeted the state residence of Vladimir Putin. So France is saying Ukraine did not target Putin's compound. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, stated that proof is unnecessary for the alleged Ukraine drone strike on Putin's compound. And Zelensky said that he is currently discussing with President Trump U.S. troop presence in Ukraine as part of a peace deal. So that is serious, guys, because if that does happen, that could be what causes World War III. If the U.S. has troops in Ukraine monitoring the front lines or monitoring the border areas with Russia, it's just inevitable that there's going to be some crossfire, okay? And the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, said that the United States has expressed readiness to participate in providing Ukraine with security guarantees after a peace agreement is reached, including through the possible deployment of American troops on the border or along the line of contact with Russia. Wow. And last night, large areas of Moscow were without power amid a large Ukrainian drone attack carried out against Moscow. And last night, for some reason, the heaviest cargo plane in the U.S. military arrived at the NATO weapons hub in Poland at Rzeszów International Airport. And what's interesting is we know Trump has halted weapons deliveries to Ukraine. So I don't know what was on that C-5 Galaxy, but that is a massive plane. It's the largest cargo plane that we have. So that's a big deal for that thing to be landing at the NATO weapons hub in Poland. And I want to just show you guys some flights. So this afternoon we have a U.S. nuclear war command and control plane hugging the Texas coast here, the Gulf Coast. These planes are responsible for communicating with our submerged nuclear-armed submarines. And then here we have a U.S. Navy C-130. This could either be a cargo plane or a special operations plane, okay, leaving North Carolina and heading to Puerto Rico. So potentially either troops or equipment are being moved to Puerto Rico still. And here's that heavy cargo plane landing in Rzeszów International Airport late last night, a C-5 Super Galaxy. Remember, weapons have been halted to Ukraine. Why would you need this massive cargo plane going to southeastern Poland if weapons have been halted, okay? And also last night we had a recon drone patrolling the Yucatan Peninsula and the Bay of Campeche. And 2 nights ago we had this same recon drone off the coast of Venezuela. And then there was also another C-17 Globemaster cargo plane that left Puerto Rico. And then interestingly, last night we had this super heavy U.S. military cargo plane, another C-5 Galaxy, that had a Mayday emergency call off the coast of California. It took off from Travis Air Force Base, went out into the Pacific, and then maybe just 200 miles from the California coast, turned around and came back, and it was squawking a 7700, which is basically a modern version of a Mayday. Okay, it's an emergency, a general emergency. They were having some issues, maybe with their flaps, maybe with their engine, maybe with their wings, their avionics, who knows, but very concerning. And speaking of California, we had a 5.3 magnitude earthquake last night in Northern California. Interestingly, not far from the Oroville Dam. If you remember, about 10 years ago, the Oroville Dam failed, and everybody was concerned that it was going to completely burst and flood all of Sacramento. But I don't know how this earthquake is going to now affect that Oroville Dam, because they did try to fix it up a little bit. But many of these massive dams here in Northern California were built in the 40s, okay? And they're earth dams, so they naturally erode over time. And I don't know how intense shaking can affect some of these old structures, okay? So if you're in the Northern California area and you're downstream from a dam, you better, first of all, try to relocate if you can, and second of all, have a good plan, okay? And despite Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov claiming that 91 Ukrainian drones were launched at Putin's residence by Ukraine, The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that only a total of 41 drones were intercepted over the region and initially made no mention of the president's residence until the claim was made by Lavrov. Okay, so that's a little bit fishy. Clearly, Russia is making this up, essentially. I know some of you guys aren't going to like to hear that, and I don't really care because that's the truth. Okay, there's multiple stories, Lavrov saying one thing, the Russian military saying another thing, and then even more interesting, we have 0 eyewitness reports in the area of Putin's residence confirming any air defense activity or any drone activity. Remember, Putin's compound has a large amount of air defenses. So if 100 drones were flying anywhere near Putin's compound, these air defenses would be firing off like crazy, okay? And people would hear it, but so far it's been totally quiet. We haven't heard anything, okay? Also, I want to address this issue with the doomsday radio in Russia. Everybody was talking about that yesterday. The Swan Lake song was played in the background of the Russian buzzer, which is the primary Russian nuclear war frequency. Everybody was making a big deal out of it. A lot of the pro-Russian social media accounts were promoting that and saying that, oh, this is evidence that, Russia's about to hit Ukraine really hard because Ukraine attacked Putin's compound. These are all just speculations, guys. These people just want your views. They want your clicks. They want you to buy their products. This is all just a bunch of nonsense made up with 0 evidence about anything, okay? First of all, we've been monitoring the Russian buzzer here on this channel for years, and this type of thing happens all the time, and it's actually usually the Ukrainians that are the ones playing these songs over the Russian buzzer, and the purpose of that is just simply trolling. Okay, they're trolling the Russian military, and sometimes they play these bizarre songs. We've been covering the buzzer so long that sometimes late at night in the live streams, we'll hear for several hours songs going back to back, random 80s or 90s techno music, okay, on top of the buzzer, and nobody talks about that, but suddenly, oh no, Swan Lake was played on the buzzer. It's the end of the world. Putin's going to nuke Ukraine and nuke Washington, D.C. Everybody run into your basements. It's just a bunch of nonsense, okay? And the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that the West must clearly understand that in the event of an invasion or any military provocations, we are entirely capable of responding with the forces and means at our disposal, including with tactical nuclear weapons. So Lavrov threatening to use tactical nuclear weapons again, okay? It's basically a daily occurrence in Russia, okay? Anytime something doesn't go the way that they like, they just threaten to nuke us. We're going to nuke NATO. We're going to nuke Florida. We're going to nuke Mar-a-Lago. We're going to nuke Ukraine. We're going to nuke the UK. We're going to nuke Brussels. It's just ridiculous. And Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, said that Russia is at it again, using dangerous statements to undermine all achievements of our shared diplomatic efforts with Trump's team. We keep working together to bring peace closer. This alleged residence strike story is a complete fabrication intended to justify additional attacks against Ukraine, including Kyiv, as well as Russia's own refusal to take necessary steps to end the war. Typical Russian lies. Furthermore, the Russians have already targeted Kyiv in the past, including the cabinet minister's building. Okay, so that's what Zelensky said. And we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I do think that Russia's going to launch a big attack sometime in the next 24 hours, and we will be monitoring everything live. So you can tune into the live stream tonight and tomorrow, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and we're going to be monitoring the radio systems live for anything crazy. And over the past 48 hours, China surrounded Taiwan and executed large-scale live-fire military exercises featuring simulated decapitation strikes and the seizure of key ports. Wow. Taiwan reported that 130 Chinese military aircraft and 14 Chinese naval vessels and 8 Chinese Coast Guard vessels were taking part in the Chinese blockade exercises, which they say is the second largest violation of their economic zone. Okay, so not their territorial waters, but right outside of their territorial waters, they have an ADIZ and exclusive economic zone, and this is the largest number of Chinese military planes and naval vessels right outside their territorial waters since 2024. And Taiwan deployed the HF-2 and HF-3 anti-ship missile systems at multiple locations across the island in response to the exercise. Chinese state media released 2 exercise posters, the first of which, titled National Reunification, depicts the Chinese People's Liberation Army severing vines that are infecting Taiwan from overseas. Wow. And China warned the United States to stop all arms sales to Taiwan. If you remember, like 2 weeks ago, the U.S. sold the largest package of weapons to Taiwan ever. I forget how many billion it was, like 11 billion or something crazy like that. Hundreds of Patriot missiles and various HIMARS missiles and all different kinds of things. And a Pentagon report released last week says the U.S. military believed China was preparing to be able to fight and win a war against Taiwan by 2027. Okay, so I'm very concerned with these exercises that we could see China finally make a move of some kind against Taiwan in 2026. We'll have to wait and see. But, you know, outside of a all-out invasion or all-out attack, they could just encircle Taiwan and do a blockade. And finally, I wanted to just show you some crazy footage coming out of central Poland, right outside of the capital of Poland, Warsaw. You can see a bunch of motorists stranded in blizzard conditions. You can see that the vehicles here are framed, which means that they're stuck up to their frame. And when you're stuck up to your frame, whether it's snow or mud or sand, you're not going anywhere, okay? So I just wanted to quickly talk about winter survival gear, especially for your vehicle. Now that it's, you know, the dead of winter, you should always keep spare clothing. I always keep a warm hat, warm boots, wool socks, appropriate outerwear. Basically everything I carry when I go hunting or when I go hiking in the winter time, or I go coyote hunting in the winter, I carry all that in my vehicle. And then I always carry a container of unsalted peanuts in my vehicle, because peanuts won't melt if you leave them in the summertime. And you can throw a container of peanuts in your vehicle and they'll be fine for an entire year, whether they sit in the middle of the scorching heat in the summer to the freezing cold temperatures in winter. The peanuts won't go bad. They're not going to melt. They're not going to blow up, okay? And you have a source of calories, which can keep you warm, okay? When temperatures drop, food is actually what keeps your body temperature up, okay? You got to think of your body as like a wood stove. You got to feed the wood stove with wood or coal if you have a coal stove. Same thing with your body. If you don't have enough calories, your body temperature is going to drop and you're going to get colder, okay? Also, another important thing to have are traction boards. They're not expensive. I always keep a pair of traction boards in my car, and then I keep 4 traction boards in my truck, one for each tire, because I have 4-wheel drive in my truck. But for front wheel drive or rear wheel drive cars or trucks, you really just need 2, and you slide them under the drive tires or drive wheels to get traction, okay? They're not expensive, and they're a lot better than kitty litter, okay? Another thing that's good to have are just some lights, like strobe lights, to let other motorists know that you're stranded so they don't collide with you. Also, it's good to keep a tow strap in case somebody passes by and they have a suitable vehicle that may be able to give you a tug. Just having a tow strap can be really critical, okay? But best of all, if you even doubt in your mind that conditions could be bad, you're better off just staying home. And I'm speaking to you from experience. I have been stranded in deep snow in the middle of the wilderness with my off-road truck miles away from civilization because I drove into a snowdrift that I didn't know it was there. The thing is when you have this type of snow, it's powdery. So you could have one area that's maybe 6 inches of snow and you're going through it fine. And then you drive to another area and there could be a dip, and that dip could be significantly deeper and you can't tell because everything looks the same because of the powder snow, okay? And that's how you get stuck. All right, and it's not a fun situation to be in when it's very windy. You have -20 wind chills, okay? I've also been in situations where I had to drive on solid ice, and it took me 3 hours to go 20 miles, okay, through a state forest with nobody around. I mean, it's just not worth it, okay? Stay home, stay warm. And I will be checking into the live stream the rest of the night. And I wish everybody a happy new year. I wish all of you guys the best in 2026. I wish that all of you guys are healthy in mind and body. I wish that you put your faith in Jesus Christ and give all your problems to Him. And also I wish you a lot of wealth as well. Wealth is important. And until the next time, take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 P's: prepare, practice, and persevere. And before I continue with the breaking news, I wanted to mention the sponsor for this update, which is My Patriot Supply. Guys, My Patriot Supply is doing a massive sale on their 3-month emergency food supply. And to get the deal, you got to use my link. It's in the description below this video. It's preparewithNYPrepper.com. So they're selling their 3-month emergency food kit at 30% off. Plus, they're going to throw in an additional month of food. So that's 4 months of food. And the normal price would be $944. And they're selling it at just under $700 for 4 months of food. And this food has a 25-year shelf life, and it's all packed into rugged, watertight buckets that don't take up a lot of space in your home. And the food is obviously nutritious, which is very important for surviving any kind of SHTF situation. You can also use this food for camping and traveling. But use the link preparewithNYPrepper.com to get a free month of emergency food with your 3-month emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply, all at 30% off, just $700 for 4 months of food. So use the link preparewithNYPrepper.com to get the deal, and the link is in the description below this video.